Stellar Crown is the name of our next main set, due out September 13th. This set will debut Stellar Pokemon for the first time in the Pokemon trading card game. These new cards remind me a little bit of Crystal Pokemon from the early 2000s, released in Aquapolis and Skyridge. Both Crystal Pokemon and Stellar Pokemon are white, and they have all of these funky attack costs. But unlike Crystal Pokemon, the new Stellar cards are not necessarily colorless Pokemon, even though they kind of look colorless, where Crystal Pokemon were entirely colorless. It also looks like there's going to be some powerful new cards that interact with Stellar Pokemon, which I'm excited to talk about in this video. As always, if you'd like to add some Pokemon cards to your collection and support the channel at the same time, make sure to do all of your Pokemon TCG shopping at FullGripGames.com. FullGripGames.com has a great selection of Pokemon TCG singles, sealed products, and accessories. They have fast shipping and exceptional grading. There is no better place to shop for your Pokemon cards than at FullGripGames.com. FullGripGames.com also has a buy list where they are always buying bulk and singles so that you can turn your extra Pokemon cards into cash or store credit. Thank you so much for buying and selling at FullGripGames.com. Now, let's talk about those new Tera Pokemon from Stellar Crown. Before we get into talking about the Tera Pokemon themselves, I think it's important to take a look at the support they're going to be getting so that we have better context to analyze the new cards with. First up, we've got the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium, which says that if a player has a Tera Pokemon in play, they can have up to 8 Pokemon on their bench. There have been a couple cards in Pokemon TCG history that allow you to extend your bench all the way out to 8. Immediately, Skyfield from Roaring Skies and the X and Y block comes to mind. This stadium was extremely popular for allowing decks to use Shaman EX to draw extra cards, as Shaman EX had to take up a spot on your bench, but also for allowing certain decks to deal more damage. Eternatus VMAX is a little bit more of a recent example. Its Eternal Zone ability allowed you to have up to 8 Pokemon on your bench, so long as all of your Pokemon in play were Darkness type. So this is not a new effect in the Pokemon TCG, but it is interesting to see it come back with the stipulation that you have to have a Tera Pokemon in play. There's also the Sparkling Crystal Aspec Tool card that reads, the attack cost of the Tera Pokemon this card is attached to is reduced by 1 of any type of energy. This is obviously very good for Stellar Tera Pokemon since their attack costs are kind of all over the place. Crispin is a new supporter card that also helps you pay for those Stellar Pokemon's attack costs. It allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types, reveal them to your opponent, put one of them into your hand, and attach the other energy to one of your Pokemon. With energy accelerating supporters like this, you do have to ask yourself, how am I going to be drawing cards, since Crispin doesn't draw you any cards from your deck, and it does take up your supporter for turn, but this is a very powerful energy accelerating effect, and the fact that you can accelerate to any of your Pokemon in play, not just the active or the bench, makes it a pretty flexible card. Briar is another supporter card that is much more limited in its use. You can only play this card if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining. Until the end of this turn, if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from one of your Tera Pokemon's attacks, take 1 more prize card. Now keep in mind, this Briar card doesn't just work on Stellar Pokemon. It works on all Tera Pokemon. So you could play this in your Charizard EX Pidgeot deck to take 2 prizes on a single prize Pokemon at the end of a game, which is kind of crazy. This is a very limited use case card, though. You can only play it if your opponent has 2 prize cards remaining, but there are plenty of ways in standard format to search out the exact card you need right when you need it. So maybe Briar will see some play to clinch out those wins at the end of the game. And as if Crispin wasn't enough, we've also got item-based energy acceleration on the way for colorless Pokemon. Glass Trumpet is an item card that you can only play if you have a Tera Pokemon in play. But if you do, you can choose up to 2 of your bench colorless Pokemon and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of them. So if you have a deck that features Tera Pokemon and colorless Pokemon, and you want to accelerate energy to those colorless Pokemon, you're probably going to be playing 4 copies of Glass Trumpet. And this card pairs really well with the new Terapagos EX that was just revealed. Terapagos EX is a new colorless basic Tera Pokemon EX with 230 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Unified Beatdown, costs 2 colorless energy, and you can't use this attack on your first turn going second. The attack does 30 damage for each of your benched Pokemon. That's an interesting drawback. I don't think that I've ever seen that drawback before in the Pokemon TCG, and it seems like the game designers obviously understand how easy it would be to use this attack on your first turn going second, and they want to slow the game down just a tad. Unified Beatdown can do 30 damage times 8, since you can have up to 8 bench Pokemon with the new Area 0 Underdepth Stadium card, and all for just 2 energy. You could do 240 damage. Its Crown Opal attack costs a Grass, Water, and Lightning energy. It does 180 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from basic non-colorless Pokemon. So you can block Pokemon like Miraidon EX or Iron Hands EX or any big basic attackers, Raging Bolt EX, stuff like that, which seems very useful. There are a lot of turbo basic decks out there, and Terapagos EX can wall them off. Having up to 8 bench spots available is very good when you can fill your bench with Hoot Hoot and Noctowl from Stellar Crown. Noctowl has the Jewel Hunt ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, if you have any Tera Pokemon in play, you may search your deck for up to 2 trainer cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Anyone who remembers the dominance of Shady Dealings in Teleon will realize exactly how strong this card is. You can use Noctowl to go search out Glass Trumpet to accelerate energy into play. You can go get your Ace Spec if you want to. You can go get a Boss's Orders to win the game. You can go get the Area 0 Underdepths to fill your bench to do more damage with Terapagos EX. You can get any tool cards you might want. This is an absolutely nutty card, and I think that any deck that plays Tera Pokemon is going to want to find room for Noctowl. It's just that good of a card. Terapagos EX also benefits from the new Fan Rotom and Bouffalant. Fan Rotom has the Fan Call ability, which says on your first turn, you can use this ability, search your deck for up to 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 hit points or less, reveal them, and put them into your hand. Then shuffle your deck. And you can only use this ability once. You can only use it on your first turn, but it's amazing. I mean, look at Noctowl. Noctowl has 100 hit points, and it does not specify that Fan Rotom has to search out basic colorless Pokemon, just that they have less than 100 hit points. So you can use Fan Rotom's Fan Call ability to go search out a couple of Hoot Hoot and a Noctowl for the following turn, so that you can then use Jewel Hunt and start popping off as early as turn 2. This is just a really, really good card, and I suspect that any deck that wants to get colorless Pokemon into play is going to be playing Fan Rotom to get those little guys out. And then Bouffalant, who also notably has 100 hit points, so you can search him out with the Fan Rotom, has the Curly Wall ability, which says if you have another Bouffalant in play, all of your basic colorless Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks done by your opponent's Pokemon. So your Terapagos EX may only have 230 hit points, which is still a massive amount of HP for a basic Pokemon, by the way. But with Bouffalant in play and its Curly Wall ability activated, it's going to be taking 60 less damage from your opponent's attacks. So that's an effective 290 hit points, and that's all without a tool card. You could put a Bravery Charm on your Terapagos EX and give it even more HP, making it a ridiculously tough Pokemon to take down. The Terapagos EX deck is a deck that the game designers really seem to be pushing on the players. It kind of builds itself. You're going to be playing the Area 0 Underdepth Stadium. You're going to be playing 4 copies of Glass Trumpet. And you're going to play Noctowl and Bouffalant to support your Terapagos and fill your bench. It seems pretty busted, honestly, and I'm really excited to test this deck out as soon as the set is released in Japan here in July. I'm going to be opening cards from Japan's Stellar Miracle and then testing them out on tabletop before the set releases here in the United States. Up next is Galvantula EX, who evolves from the absolutely ridiculous Joltik. Joltik only has 30 hit points, but its battery charge attack can accelerate up to 4 energy into play. It costs 1 colorless energy and allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic grass energy and 2 basic lightning energy and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. This is perfect for Galvantula EX since its Fulgurite attack costs a grass energy, a lightning energy, and a fighting energy, just cuz. Fulgurite does 180 damage and requires that you discard all energy from this Pokemon, and during your opponent's next turn, they can't play any item cards from their hand. So 180 damage plus item lock. A very expensive attack since you have to discard all of your energy, but a very powerful one. You're going to be 2-hit KOing everything in the Pokemon TCG and inflicting item lock on your opponents, preventing them from playing valuable item cards that they probably need to set up their strategy. And then Galvantula EX's first attack, Charged Web, costs a lightning and a colorless energy, and it does 110 damage, plus 110 more damage if your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX or Pokemon V. 220 damage for just 2 energy is great damage output, and I imagine that Galvantula EX will usually be smacking something with Charged Web to deal 220 damage, and then finishing it off with a Fulgurite, 180 damage, item lock, and then prepare for the next attack after that. So the Galvantula deck seems pretty cool. You're going to be pivoting between item lock and big knockouts with Charged Web, and I really like that kind of back and forth you're going to have while playing this deck. Not to mention the energy acceleration built in with the Joltik. Lapras EX is kind of silly. It's got 220 hit points and the Power Splash attack, which does 40 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. That's not very silly. That's very standard fare for Lapras, actually. But Larimar Rain costs a water, a psychic, and a metal energy, and allows you to look at the top 20 cards of your deck and attach any number of energy cards you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. Then shuffle the other cards back into your deck. 20 cards! You get to look at 20 cards. By the time you draw your opening hand and set out your prize cards, 20 cards is going to be nearly half your deck. That's just crazy. And you attach all of the energy cards you find there to your Pokemon. It doesn't have to be basic energy either. I'm curious to see if anybody will actually be able to tap into Lapras EX's full potential and use Larimar Rain to accelerate loads of energy into play. The way the attack is designed, you do have to build your deck in a way that, you'll be able to accelerate a meaningful amount of energy into play with Larimar Rain. You do have to take a turn off in order to use Larimar Rain. So by the time you actually use Larimar Rain, you better be setting up something that's like pretty, substantial. You got to be setting up kind of like a checkmate board state in a way. And maybe there's a combination out there where Lapras EX can use Larimar Rain, get a bunch of energy into play, and then you can sweep your opponents with the energy to accelerate. But that is a lot to ask. It is possible to get a turn 1 Larimar Rain if you attach the new Ace Spec to Lapras EX and then use a turn 1 Crispin. I mean, that's a lot to ask, but it is technically possible. Though I'm leaning towards thinking that this is kind of a gimmick and not going to be a real meta card. Even Power Splash as an attack in like a Baxcalibur deck, I would rather just use Chien-Pao EX, which has a better multiplier of 60. You do have to discard the energy attached, but That's a small price to pay, considering you're doing way more damage for less energy. Cinderace EX is a Stage 2 Tera Pokemon with 320 hit points and the Flare Strike attack, which does 280 damage. During your next turn, you can't use Flare Strike. And then Garnet Volley costs a Fire, a Fighting, and a Darkness energy and does 180 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, anytime we're looking at a Stage 2 Fire-type Pokemon, you gotta ask yourself, why are we playing this card over Charizard EX? Especially since Charizard EX now has access to the Dusknoir line from Shrouded Fable and can give up prize cards to more easily manipulate the amount of damage that it's dealing. Unfortunately for Cinderace EX, I do feel like it kind of falls in that same kind of category as a card like Incineroar EX, where the card is kind of cool and even kind of good, but it's just not as good as the top fire energy using card in the metagame right now, which is definitely Charizard EX or maybe even Dragapult EX. When you compare cards like Charizard EX and Dragapult EX, they just have so much more going for them than a card like Cinderace. You're going to have to play cards that accelerate energy onto Cinderace. In addition to running the Cinderace, Charizard just powers itself up and can do over 300 damage at the end of the game. It's just such a broken card. And it hits for Darkness type weakness, which is arguably way better than hitting for Fire type weakness right now as well. So the Cinderace is fine, but I do think that it kind of just falls victim to there are other better Stage 2 Pokemon out there to play right now, unfortunately. As an added little bonus here at the end, we did get 2 more stellar Pokemon revealed from Japan. Japan is getting them in theme decks. We've got Sylveon EX and Ceruledge EX. So we've got these fun little blurry images of each of them, but the images are clear enough to be able to translate. So huge thank you to Pokebeach.com for these translations, and also huge thank you to PokemonProxies.com for all of these lovely proxies that I've been using throughout the video so far. Sylveon EX is really interesting. It's got 270 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Magical Charm, does 160 damage for a Psychic and 2 Colorless energy, and during your opponent's next turn, attacks from the defending Pokemon do 100 less damage. Its Angel Light attack costs a Water, a Lightning, and a Psychic, and allows you to choose 2 of your opponent's bench Pokemon and shuffle them and all cards attached to them into your opponent's deck. And if you used Angel Light during your last turn, this attack fails. So Sylveon is an extremely disruptive card. You could just attack your opponent's bench by tossing Pokemon that your opponent has maybe worked to build up and are trying to attack with back into your opponent's deck. If your opponent tries to limit their board state by only benching a couple of Pokemon, you could use the Fluke card to put Pokemon onto your opponent's bench so that then you can maybe gust one of them into the active spot with a counter catcher or something, and then use Angel Light to toss back your opponent's most important Pokemon into their deck. You could play hand disruption cards like Unfair Stamp or Iono at the same time that you're using Angel Light as well to really limit your opponent's hand, limit their board, and just control what they're doing. And then Magical Charm is a nice defensive attack. It's not the most powerful attack. 160 damage is pretty weak. You're not even 2-hit KOing everything in the Pokemon TCG, which is kind of annoying. You could pair Magical Charm with a Defiance Band or something like that to boost its damage output and hit those 2-hit KO numbers. It does make it so that the defending Pokemon does 100 less damage during your opponent's next turn, and I hate effects like that. If you actually take a knockout on a Pokemon, then you don't get that added benefit of decreasing your opponent's attacks by 100. It has to be the defending Pokemon that does 100 less damage. So if you knock that Pokemon out, or if your opponent switches that Pokemon out of the active spot, then the defensive part of Magical Charm does nothing. And I think that that's kind of annoying. If you look at a card like Goodra V-Star, it's obviously very good because it just takes 80 less damage next turn. Doesn't matter who's attacking. So long as Goodra stays in the active spot and doesn't get reset to the bench, it takes 80 less damage. This is not exactly like that. It is a little bit worse, and it does do less damage than Hisuian Goodra V-Star as well, but that Angel Light attack is very disruptive, and you can certainly build a strategy around that. And then Ceruledge EX is a Stage 1 Pokemon EX with 270 hit points and 2 attacks. Its first attack, Abyssal Flames, costs a fire energy and does 30 damage plus 20 more damage for each basic energy in your discard pile. There have been powerful attacks like this throughout the history of the Pokemon TCG. There was Victini Prism Star, which did more damage for the amount of energy in your discard pile. There's Volcarona V, which had a very similar thing going on and was good for a period of time, I think, in expanded format. So that's kind of interesting. This is a Stage 1, but the attack only costs 1 fire energy, so certainly an attack you could build a strategy around. And then Amethyst Rage costs a fire, a psychic, and a metal energy, and it does 280 damage, and you have to discard all energy from this Pokemon. So you could build up Amethyst Rage and swing for 280 damage. Obviously a very solid amount of damage to do. With a maximum belt, you're hitting all the way up to 330 damage. Giratina V-Star proved just how good it is to be able to crank out 280 damage over and over again throughout the game. And then once you use a couple of Amethyst Rage attacks, maybe you'll have a bunch of energy in the discard pile, and you can use Abyssal Flames to finish your opponent off. And that does it for the video. Let me know which stellar Pokemon you're most excited for in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. If you like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, not just this channel, but also the Tricky Jim VODs YouTube channel, where I upload all of my streams in their entirety. I'm going to be going on vacation here next week, so the uploads are going to be a little bit light, as they kind of have been here in July anyways, because there's not a ton of stuff going on right now. The World Championships are in August, and, you know, the next set doesn't come out until August, and then this set comes out in September. So as you can see, we're kind of talking about the things that are coming up. Not too much going on right now, but I hope that you are all enjoying your July very much. Thank you so much for watching. Y'all have a good one. See ya.